All right, perfect. All right, so ecomodding and hypermiling. What we want to do today is we want to learn how to be better drivers, be more efficient, save fuel, which will in turn save us some money. We're also going to learn how to be aware of some fuel efficiency scams. Those are less common nowadays because a lot of companies got cracked down on for false advertising and whatnot, but they're still out there. And given gas prices, I'm sure it's tempting to throw some money at something that you think might save you a little bit of money. And we're going to save some gas. Okay, so what is hypermiling? Hypermiling. Okay, Walter, that's great. Hypermiling is just driving in a way that is very efficient. That's what hypermiling is. We're changing our driving strategy to drive efficiently versus driving quickly. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Oh, there's some people in the, and I almost didn't add them. Okay, good. All right, there they are. We got Stephanie. All right, and Shayna. Welcome. I was worried that there might be some friends in the waiting room. Just going to make some adjustments. There we go. Now I can see everyone. Okay, we're just getting started. You guys haven't missed anything. Ecomodding is when we modify our car to be more efficient. Usually, your best bet is with the hypermiling. The payoff with ecomodding is rather large. You have to do a lot in order to make your car more efficient because our cars, for the most part, already built very efficiently. Okay, now each car that when you buy a car will have an EPA estimated MPG, or what the government thinks that your car should get, and it'll have a city estimate and a highway estimate, and it'll have an average. So this is just kind of like our starting point, right? We want to be trying to get that. Now, these numbers are usually pretty optimistic, and they're also really not, they're not customized based on where you live. So if you live in a very flat area, that's usually where they're doing this kind of testing. It's not going to be hilly, where you add that, of that in our areas, we have quite a bit of hills, varied terrain. Some cars are going to hit this number very easily, and some cars you feel like you'll never see that that number. So our goal is to hit that number or exceed that number. Now, one of the questions you want to ask yourself is, what kind of driving do you do? Because if you're doing mainly city driving, then you're going to be getting a lot better gas mileage than if you're doing city driving, or I should say highway driving, city around town driving. You're going to be able to see the most gains from changing your highway or freeway technique. That's where you're going to see the biggest gains, because that's when our cars are at their most efficient. Around town, we can make some changes and we'll see some small results, but the reality is that around town is just going to kind of stink. Unless you're in a hybrid or a plug-in or an electric car, there's not much we can do for around town driving to really boost that number. Okay, so for city and around town driving, one of the big things we want to do is minimize idling, because idling is 0 MPG. When we're running our cars and we're not going anywhere, then we're just burning that gas, and it's not taking us anywhere. So that's going to really decrease our MPG numbers. Starting our car and is going to also use quite a bit of gas. And when we have our car warm up, that's also burning gas, because each of our cars has a certain temperature that it likes to get to until it'll be comfortable. Even hybrids do this. I have a Generation 2 Prius, and for the first few minutes, I would say about 5 to 10 minutes, the Prius won't go into hybrid mode, where it's turning the engine off and using that electric assist motor until it's reached a certain temperature, and then it would do that. So like even short trips in a hybrid, at least older hybrids, aren't always going to have the best MPG. And so if you're like me and my commute is only 3 miles, I struggle to even get close to my EPA estimate because my commute is so short. So good news is I never have to fill up very much because my commute's 3 miles. But for someone who really likes to get good gas mileage, it's a little depressing when you don't have the opportunity to drive very far, because that's kind of fun. When I was going to college, I commuted to Fullerton. So as you can imagine, even though it sounds terrible, for me, a hypermiler, it was a dream come true because I got to show off my hypermiling skills and challenge myself. Take it easy on the brakes. Coming to coasts, when we see a red light, that's when you're going to want to start. Don't step on the brakes, but when you're somewhat of a ways back, start easing up on the gas. Coast in to a stop. That's going to help us because whenever we press on our brake, we're losing that momentum, and we're going to have to make that up with using gas. So like hybrids do really well around town driving if they've had time to warm up. And so it's that 5-10 minute range. It really depends on the car. Now, plug-in hybrids, this is a different story because they have an electric motor that can completely power them. So that's a completely different ballgame. They're going to do excellent around town because you're never going to use the gas. It's just going to use your electric motor. Now, we'll come into we'll get more into that later when I have a slide about plug-in hybrids. But you want to be careful that we don't drain our battery too much without having a plug-in charger somewhere, because then your car will have to burn gas, and so it kind of defeats the purpose. All right. Highway and freeway mileage. So this is when aerodynamics play a really big role. So when you're on the highway, weight is also going to make a big difference. Cruising speed. There's a technique called pulsing and gliding. That's when we would accelerate into a, like, say, 70 miles per hour, and then put the car into neutral, and then coast down to 55 or 60, and then pulse back up slowly, and then go back down. I've never been a big fan of doing that. It seems too hard, but some people are very swear by it, and they can get really good gas mileage doing that. Around here, where we have a lot of traffic, not always the best idea to be accelerating and gliding, and so, but that's the technique that people use. Drafting. So I think we were joking about drafting on the Facebook comment section. Yeah, drafting can increase your miles per gallon, but you can also die. So that is there's definitely a trade-off there. They've done a lot of studies, and even Mythbusters did a whole thing on gas mileage stuff. And when you get right up next to a big semi truck, you can increase your gas mileage by like 60, if not 70%, because the truck is doing all the work of pushing that airway, and you're just barely having to keep up with behind. But you also have to be able to stop in an emergency, and so definitely not something you want to play around with. So you can balance that by like giving yourself quite a few cars length, and you'll still see some increase, but safety first for sure. Each car is going to have kind of a sweet spot when it comes to highway mileage, and you just kind of have to play around with that. I'll get into how to find that in a little bit. Cruise control, it really varies. If you're on really flat ground where you're not seeing a lot of hills and things, cruise control is great. The downside is that if you're in a hilly area, the cruise control doesn't care about efficiency. It just cares about speed. So cruise control is going to keep us at 60 miles per hour, whether that's good or bad for gas mileage. And it doesn't really take into account downhills. It'll still kind of keep it in accelerating or in that mode where we could put it into neutral or that kind of thing. Some basics. A well-maintained car is a happy car. That kind of goes without saying. Synthetic oil is known for being more fuel efficient than conventional oil. And you want to use the thinnest viscosity of the oil that is recommended for your vehicle. And the reason for that is because less resistance on your engine. So your engine can run at the highest level of efficiency. If we're putting in oil that is more viscous, that's creating more friction, which would decrease our miles per gallon. Tire pressure. Now, this is a big one. Always check your tire pressure at least once a month. You can buy one of those little things on Amazon and you can plug it in. So some cars now will have that. It won't necessarily tell you the level, but it'll tell you if it's low. experience will tell you that if it's telling you that it's low, then it's really low, because you want to keep your tire pressure at least the amount that's recommended by your car. And then you can also kind of look at what the tire is rated for as well. We'll look into that in a second too. Okay, so easy eco mods, how to make our cars more efficient. Removing the roof rack. So if you think of anything that's going to cause drag on your car, a roof rack is just a giant thing that's going to get in the way. It's going to get in the way of what our car was made to do in terms of aerodynamics. Removing excess weight. So every 100 pounds that we're able to remove from our car roughly translate to an increase of 1 miles per gallon. Low rolling resistance tires. So these ones are interesting. You see them advertised whenever you go to get your car. Most cars nowadays come with these, because all the car manufacturers want to be able to advertise the highest MPG given on their car. So that a lot of times they'll come with these. Now, I recently, I think within the past 2 years, I had low rolling resistance tires, but when I made the switch, I got some new tires and I didn't get them. And I found immediately I had a drop of about 5 miles per gallon. So it can make a really big difference. It really varies by car and by tire. I had like Bridgestone Ecopias, and I found pretty good results with those. I'm on some kind of what was it? I can't remember, but they're not that great. So I'm excited to be able to switch out my tires once I get to that point. So those can make a big difference. You also want to try and find, if you're not driving around in winter tires during the summer. Now, since we live in California, that's not a big issue because it's not like we're changing out our tires a lot. But if that is something that you do, then it definitely pays off to switch to summer tires when you're not needing that extra traction. MPG instrumentation. So a lot of cars will have a instantaneous miles per gallon monitor somewhere on your Prius. The newer Priuses have a little gauge that kind of moves around. It's like, oh, if it's green, it's good. And if it's red, it's bad, based on your acceleration and the different things. And those are fine. They have ones out there that are more accurate and that can give you some more details and stuff. Scan gauge is one of them, and that's about $160 to $100 depending which model you get. I personally have an ultra gauge. It's around about $80. They also have ones out there that are called like OBD2 Bluetooth dongles. And so you plug this little, and this is what all these things plug into. There's this port underneath your car, usually the steering wheel, that you can get a bunch of data from. It's what they plug into when they're trying to figure out what engine code you have. And one of the pluses is that when you have one of these devices, you can read your car's engine codes, and you can also turn off your engine light if it turns on, which is kind of a nice added value. I have an ultra gauge. I've had it for like, when did I get that thing? I was in college. It's been probably 10 years, if not, and it still works great. Works on any car. So those are really nice. And what that'll do is that'll give you enter in some information on it based on the size of your engine, size of your gas tank, and different things. And it gives you the instantaneous miles per gallon of your car. It also tells you the average of that tank, how much gas you still have, how much gas you're using, the voltage of your battery, a lot of good info. You can also set it up to where it does trip MPGs. So you have, not only do you, like, every time you start your car and turn it on, it's going to give you an average of just that trip. So then you can do like tanks, right? You can do the whole tank average and see how you're doing based on the tank, your MPG on a tank. But you can also just compare your MPG on trips, small, shorter trips. Like, how did I do going to work today? Oh, I got my record today, right? Or I didn't do so good. What do I need to change? That kind of thing. So highly recommend getting one of those. They definitely pay for themselves in your ability to increase your gas mileage. Now, speaking of devices you can buy, here are some great examples of some eco scams. And most of these aren't, they're becoming less common. These are like things you're supposed to stick in your gas tank, and it's supposed to increase your, none of these have any scientific data to back them up. These things were pretty common a while ago. They were little, and they had one called like fuel doctor. And when you open these things up, there's nothing inside. It's just an LED. So it's sad. And they say they're conditioning the electrical current in your car. It's a lot of quackery. It doesn't do anything. So here's an OBD. This is an example of something that plugs into your OBD sensor or your plug. But this one's claiming that it's going to give you fuel efficiency by plugging in there. The thing about those plugs is that they really don't they pull data. They don't really send a whole lot. So this isn't going to do anything. Then there's like fuel line magnets. You're supposed to put this little device on the fuel line, and the magnets are supposed to reorient the atoms in the fuel. And yeah, it doesn't do anything. And you're supposed to put this in your air intake, and the special design of the fins make it so the wind is mixes your fuel better, but doesn't do anything. So stay away from those. So some things that you can buy out there that will kind of give you mixed results. This is an injector cleaner. It's called Lucas Fuel Cleaner. If you have an older car that you've had for a while, this isn't the worst thing to do. It's kind of like when they add detergents and things to fuel, Chevron has Techron and all these buzz names and stuff. It's not the worst thing you can do. It can help kind of clean some of the things out there, and you might see a mild increase in gas mileage, but nothing that's going to like pay for the product itself. But they have those, and you dump it into your gas tank. Same thing with this. And then if you have a truck, these are somewhat common. They've done a lot of studies on keeping what's it called? The drop down thing at the end of the truck. I'm having a brain fade. If you bring it down, having it up, and if you cover the truck bed, those have been known to actually increase your gas mileage by quite a bit, just because you remove a whole lot of dead airspace when you're driving. Creates a lot of drag when you have that big open area there. So those can vary though, and they're expensive. So you have to start weighing, okay, how much gas am I actually going to save versus purchasing this product. Okay, so some other hypermiling tips. Big thing, the best thing you can do is start tracking your mileage. Just by being aware of like what's your gas mileage, you're going to be like less likely to step on the gas and accelerate. The easiest way to do this is to just use your on your car, like the odometer. There's usually an trip A, trip B, and then an odometer. You can I use trip A. So every time I go get gas, I reset that because I know that's super accurate. My Prius has another one that I reset, and then I have another one on my little ultra gauge. I also reset on there. So I have backup in case one of my systems fails. So I always know exactly how much distance I've driven. And then when I fill up my car, I'm keeping track of how many gallons I'm putting in. So all you have to do is divide how far you went by how many gallons you used, and then there's your MPG. And that's gonna give you consistently the most accurate average of your fuel consumption, because it's exact. The scan gauge and the ultra gauge, those can give you like they can give you more accurate ones, but sometimes the problem is that a lot of modern gas tanks have these bladders inside, and depending on how warm it is or however it is inside there, you can put, just because you're putting gas in, it doesn't mean you necessarily use that gas. It's just that your gas tank is filling up that much. But so I always go by my how many miles I went divided by how much gas I'm putting in, even though I know it's not exact. The average is exact, even though if my actual usage wasn't perfect. And you'll see on the graph, and I'll show you in a little bit how that kind of looks sometimes, because sometimes you'll go fill up and you're like, man, I was expecting better gas mileage, and then like the next week it shoots up a bunch because you were filling gas that was you're not accounted for, or like it was not accounted for in one of those calculations. And then just gamifying it, making it more fun. I always like to look at every trip as a challenge. What can I do to get there more efficient? Now, a lot of cars nowadays will have an eco mode, and that's just going to prioritize fuel efficiency over power. My car doesn't have that. I have a generation 2 Prius. I know that the 3rd generation Prius does, and I'm pretty sure some of the newer ones do too. It'll have like a sport mode or like a power mode. Now, if you have a hybrid that has an EV mode, unless you have a plug-in hybrid, you really don't want to use those as much, because with a hybrid, as soon as you drain that battery, it's going to use the engine to charge it back up, and that burns gas, even though it's supposed to be, it's efficient. You just have to try and make sure that with a hybrid, you're not using the electricity inefficiently. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more later. So reduce speed, that's a big one. Each car has its sweet spot. So before my Prius, I had a 1999 Camry, and I was able to figure out that if I was going 62 miles per gallon, or 62 miles per hour, I could get 44 miles per gallon. And that was on a car that was only rated for, I think it was like 28 highway. So you can see some pretty massive increases just by finding that efficient spot. Rule of thumb is that slower is better. But I found that in my 2008 Prius, I can get 55 plus miles per gallon around, supposed to say 70 miles per hour. So many acronyms. On flat ground, I can get about 55 plus if I'm going around 70 on flat ground. We recently took a trip down to San Diego not that long ago, and we hit traffic and it was horrible, but I still got around 55 miles per gallon on that trip, just because it's relatively flat. There was a lot of traffic, which sounds terrible, but when it comes to a hybrid, that's like the hybrid's favorite place is traffic, because you're going fast enough occasionally where it recharges the battery, and then you're just using electricity and very little gas. So, but that's why instrumentation is so helpful, because you're able to more accurately define where that sweet spot is for your car. Another hypermiling technique with AC versus Windows. So this is another thing they talked about in the Mythbusters one. When it comes to around town, Windows down is better for like around town driving, because the AC, it's gonna probably make your alternator kick on, and when your alternator kicks on, it's gonna force your engine to work harder, especially if you're idling. You'll notice sometimes if you're idling, you'll hear your engine kind of rev up if it needs to use the alternator. Or I noticed it in my Prius, if I'm at a stoplight sometimes and I'm blasting the AC, even though the hybrid is designed to turn off the engine at a stop, if my battery isn't at the right spot, it'll kick on the engine to then provide more power to give me air conditioning. Now, like of all things, there's definitely a point where you're like, I don't care how hot it is, I'm not opening the windows. And that's the trade-off. We live in Southern California, so it's just part of the deal, I guess. But AC at higher speeds, it doesn't affect miles per gallon nearly as much. When it comes to, you can use flow through ventilation. So if you turn your AC off and you're just using the fan that's bringing fresh air in, if it's cool enough outside, that's a great alternative, because then you get the aerodynamics and you get fresh air. Sunroofs at higher speeds is helpful, but sunroofs are very good at helping relieve that heat. If you're in a car that's really hot, like parking in a parking lot, the sunroof is going to be great at letting all that hot air out. Parking in the shade helps. If you ever live in a colder climate, they do make block heaters. That's what a lot of people don't even know what those are if they've lived in California the whole time. There's a special spot in every car where there's this little port where you plug in this device, and what it does is you plug it into an outlet and it starts to preheat your engine block. This is for if it's like freezing, and that way when you go to start your car, you're not starting a car that's at negative 10 degrees. You're starting a car that's quite a bit warmer. Some people are very, very into hypermiling, and so they'll do this even when it's like 60 degrees out. They'll use an engine block heater to get that little bit extra. I haven't gone that far yet, but it's tempting. Some other ones: don't rush. Whenever you rush, you're going to be more likely to accelerate. And what you'll find too is that on short trips, accelerating to 60 miles per hour for a 2-second burst is just going to burn a lot of gas and save you very little time. So it can make a big difference on your gas mileage if you're not in a hurry and you're just taking your time. Drive-throughs are a big one. I know during COVID, we used drive-throughs a lot because we weren't supposed to go inside, and it's probably better not to go inside, but drive-throughs, it's idling, right? So if you can make the choice of doing pickup instead, depending on how quick that drive-through is, you can save a little gas. And don't accelerate to stops. That always hurts. If I'm ever riding with someone and they're driving and they're like accelerating to the red light and then slowing down, and you're just like feeling, that's just all gas. You're turning your gasoline into brake dust. So that's not what we want to do. So some local realities. I mentioned hills stink for MPG. I know when I first started doing this, I was like only driving around town, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? My MPG went up like 1 miles per gallon. But it's because depending on what car you drive, and if you're just doing around town driving, the gains that you're gonna be able to make is really hard, because even a hill like going up Bake to Foothill Ranch, that's a decent hill. You can make some of that up if you're coming back that way, but hills are tough. You can, using your like an ultra gauge or a scan gauge, you can find a point where you get okay gas mileage. When I would drive up to Bakersfield to visit my grandparents, I found that I could go up a hill at like 60 miles per hour, and if I was able to kind of get it to the right gearing, it would get something like 20 miles per gallon, which doesn't sound great, but if you're going uphill, you're just looking for anything in the reasonable terms of efficiency. Even hybrids have to warm up. I mentioned that earlier. Short trips hurt MPG. The exception is with plug-in hybrids. Heat is good. So like warm weather is great for our engines because they like to be warm. So it takes less time to warm up, but it's also bad for human comfort. So that's one of the other things is do you want to sacrifice comfort or efficiency? Parking in the shade can help. Using a sun visor can help. Parking in a garage. We just recently, now we moved back in May, and I'll tell you, having a garage is such a game changer when it comes to comfort in the summer, because I'm so used to getting into a car that's just 1,000,000 degrees, and then it takes forever to cool it off. And that can take a surprisingly, it can really take a lot of energy to cool off a really hot car. And if you're not driving a plug-in hybrid or an electric car, that's all coming from gas to cool off your car. So it's a good idea, like if you do have to do that, if you have to park, out the sun to kind of flush out all that hot air first, and then switch over to AC if possible. Traffic, great for hybrids, plug-in hybrids, electric cars, really bad for gas drivers, because it's like idling and you're just sitting there, burning gas. Not much you can do to avoid it, but it's there. Okay, next one. Hybrid versus plug-in hybrid. So what's the biggest difference here? I have a hybrid. So that's a gas car with an electric assist motor. The electric motor can only power my car if it has enough battery power and if it's under 40 miles per gallon. Most of the time, even if I'm accelerating from a complete stop, it's going to use my gas engine because it's just not quite powerful enough to get me going. Usually around 30, 40 miles per gallon. My battery is only charged through engine braking or through the engine. That's the only way that my battery gets charged. And at slow speeds, it can use that electric motor. Most of the time, it's using the electric motor and the gas motor in unison to power the car, just making the gas engine use less. Plug-in hybrids, those are different because you almost have an entire, like two cars. You have a electric car with a pretty decent sized battery, and you have an electric car. You can charge those from home, which if you have one of those, you want to try to do as much as possible. When I was living at my old condominium, there was like 3 people that had plug-in hybrids that couldn't charge their car because of where we lived. And I was going, oh, this is killing me. Like you're paying the extra to have this battery in your car, but then you're not utilizing it. It really hurt me on the inside. So the electric motor in a plug-in hybrid it can power your car all the way up to highway speeds. Now there are some trade-offs with that, because depending on how far you're going, you really don't want to use all EV mode, even though it's tempting, because it's 100, like whatever the MPG, they have like a formula to calculate the volts that are in a gallon of gas. So they can, like, if you ever see that MPGE, they have a formula to figure that out. But you can actually make it worse by draining your plug-in battery so much to then where the engine has to kick on. Whereas if you had just started in hybrid mode and taken advantage of your larger battery, then you can use it for a longer drive. So that's kind of an interesting thing you have to kind of weigh if you have a plug-in hybrid. Extended range EVs. Now, these aren't as common. You might have heard that Chevy Volt is one of these, the BMW i3. I'm sure everyone in our Buy Nothing group is rocking a Karma Rivero GT. They're actually a local company. You see they're on Bacon Geronimo. They're a luxury EV company. But extended range EVs are different because it is a electric car with a gas generator in the back. And so the only time that gas generator turns on is if the battery gets low, and the power from the generator isn't powering the drivetrain at all. It's just charging the battery. It's kind of an interesting middle ground between EVs and plugins, and primarily a plug-in, but it has this little generator in their back. Not many companies are making that anymore, though. So it's not as big of a group. Okay, so hybrid pro tips: keep it in eco mode. EV mode, I mentioned this earlier. You really don't want to use EV mode, even if it's just a little bit, because the batteries are pretty small in the general hybrid that you might make it a mile and then it's going to drain the battery and you're going to have to use the engine to recharge it. So we don't want to try and do that. Braking lightly is going to help you utilize our regenerative braking. Now, if you're going down a hill, you can just keep it in drive and charge your battery up the whole way, like no problem. And then you're just, when I drive it to Mammoth, the way home is always so much fun, because for a good amount of the time, I'm not using any gas. My battery's at full, and it's a hypermiler's dream going home. Going there, another story. A little bit rough on some of those uphills, but it's not too bad. You can actually feel in a lot of hybrids, and this would go for hybrids, electric cars, pretty much any car. You can actually feel it when the actual brake engages, because you'll press on your brake, and it's a very a soft braking. And then once you get slower, like around 5 miles per hour, you'll actually feel a tug, and that's your brake pads engaging on your brakes. You'll notice that. And if you're braking too fast, it's going to engage the brakes before the regenerative brakes, because they'll stop better. And so we want to try and brake slowly. Even with a hybrid, momentum is still better. So if you can, keep your momentum versus just using the brake to try and charge your battery. Downhill coasting when in drive will charge the battery. Coasting in neutral will not. So I don't know if anyone's ever tried that, but if you're in a hybrid and you're going down a big hill and you're in like gas mode and you put it in neutral, the engine will stay on because that's what it's been told to do. There's a bypass where you can try and get into like special mode, where if you start going down a hill under 40 miles per hour and the gas engine turns off, then you put it in neutral. Then you can go up to whatever speed because you're in neutral and the engine won't stay on. I don't have to drive down Bake very often anymore, but that's like the only hill where I'm able to locally where I'm able to do that. If you get stopped at the top and you're going down, you can start at a lower speed, then you can use that little hack. Plug-in hybrid tips. One big thing is if you have a plug-in hybrid, you're able to get a lower rate with Southern California Edison. So that's a fun one. And you're going to want to charge it off peak hours, not during like the big time, the peak hours, because you'll be paying more for your electricity. But definitely hit them up because you'll be paying less for your electricity. Keep EV mode for driving around town. For longer trips, put it in hybrid mode. That'll extend your efficiency range. And it's just better for your battery because those do have a lifespan. pretty much normal Hypermiling rules apply. Most of the strategies that you would use for driving a normal car are gonna come into play with a plug-in hybrid. Okay, so why make an Ecomodding.com account? So you could have an Excel sheet. You could just keep track of your mileage on any other variety of things. There's apps. Fuely, I think, is one of them. I just really like the Ecomodding.com website because you get really cool graphs like this. So this is my Prius. I bought it in 2014, and this shows you each one. I've tracked every single one of my fill-ups for the lifetime of this vehicle, and you can see I've got some really great high spots and some low spots. And this low spot was somewhat recently, so it's kind of sad and ironic that I'm now giving this talk. My worst mileage of my life has been somewhat recently. But it's also getting older, and older cars, the battery's kind of getting low, a little bit less efficient. But you can see I've got some good ones over 50 miles per hour. I'm really proud of those. And it gives you your average. That little green line, that little dots, that's my average MPG. And I was at 45 for such a long time. And then this past year and a half, we just haven't driven anywhere during COVID. So it was like, just didn't go anywhere around town. So it's just brutal. But my EPA combined is 46. So I mean, this is just really sad that I'm below. I don't drive very much. So what kind of data do you get from this? Well, you can see I've got a bunch of data here. So like my lifetime fuel economy, I've owned the car. I've got 43 miles per gallon. So like more recently, 90 day, I'm only getting like 37, which is just embarrassing. 3 tank. I've filled up my car with gas 166 times since 2014. Now this one is funny because the gas is so much now. Look at it, it's twice as much as my average. That's wild. And it used to only cost me around $28 to fill up. Total fuel used, I've used 1,483 gallons of gas, and I've only used my car. I've only traveled 64,000 miles. Look at that. Some of this I'm looking for the first time because I just don't notice it. That's funny. I've spent $4,000, almost $4.5 grand on gas from 2014. So that's not too bad. I'd be interested to see what that looks like for everyone. This is sad. Total fuel saved versus EPA. I'm down 82 gallons because I don't drive on the highway very much, and I've not saved negative 263 gallons of gas. And there's like my average tank, and so you get data, right? That's what you want. And so you can track it and see how you're doing. Maybe I changed my tires, like I had mentioned. I noticed a massive decrease, and I noticed that because of my tracking my fuel. And there's me misspelling entry, fuel log entry. And so every time you go get gas, I just open up my phone, I log into my account, I put in distance, fuel used, price, and then sometimes I'll put some stuff here. I'll put like, oh, my Kristen, my wife, was driving the car a bunch, so that's why the gas mileage is so bad, right? Or I'll blame something. We had to take the kids, and their car seats weigh so much. That's why the gas mileage is so down. It's where you type in your excuses. And so this is what it looks like after you've done that. It's like each trip, this is what you see. So this is so 2018, I went and found my best tank ever. Because I just, I had to be like, yeah, don't worry, I've actually done well before, not just this 37 miles per gallon sadness. 2018, I got a tank with 54 miles per gallon, but you can see like that next one, I went down to 43. So when I'm talking about like the difference you see, just like with tank to tank, sometimes your gas tank will accept a little more or a little less, depending on a lot of factors. And that can kind of play in with the week to week. So your average is what you want to look at. But that's what you can kind of see there. Okay, so I was going to do a tour, but if anybody has any questions or anything, there's not a whole lot to see on the website. There's a forum. You can ask tons of questions. People are pretty active on here, and they're super friendly. If you want to look at any more tips, there's hypermiling tips, efficiency tips, and the garage is where you do your the garage is where you put in your info. It's telling me I'm invalid. No, I'm not. So you can connect with me on here. You can see all my contributions to the forums, which is I hang out in hybrids occasionally. In my college years, the Unicorn Corral was really fun. This is where they put all the scam stuff and people try and convince each other that, you know, something works or doesn't work. So it's pretty funny. Tuner chips, that was one of the things they were talking about. So a lot of great stuff there, but the garage is where you primarily, that's what I use. And you can actually, one of the cool things you can do is type in your car, the year of your car, the make and the model, and you can see other people who have that exact car and see how they're doing and see what how efficient their car has handled over the years. So does anybody have any questions? Because we're a little over time. It's almost been an hour. So if anybody has any questions or anything, now's the time. What kind of car does everyone drive? I'm so curious. You can use the chat or feel free to unmute yourself. Prius, nice. Stephanie, do you know what your like average, like your typical tank is like for MPG? You have any idea? 22. Oh, Corolla hybrid. Glorious 2006 Toyota Highlander. Okay, so Highlander SUV, decent sized SUV. That's, yeah, and a 2006. That's going to be it's going to be rough when it comes to the mileage, but you'd be surprised on the SUVs. Like even just on SUVs, since your mileage, your MPG is already so low, you can increase it percentage wise pretty small, and it makes a big difference. A 4Runner, ooh, 10 City, Walter, yeah, that's gotta hurt. 10 City, whew. Yeah, the small cars, Corolla, you'd be surprised. A lot of those small gas cars do so well. Even the older ones, like I was so impressed with my Camry, and it had a massive gas tank. So I was going like 500 plus on a tank because it just had such a big gas tank. Cool. Toyota, yeah, seriously, we're all Toyota people. Look at that. Yeah, my wife has the Honda Civic. She's the odd one out. All right. Well, I hope this was useful. I hope I'll see you guys on the forum. See you guys tracking on the garage. I'm nowhere near the top. Some of these are crazy. Like this person, Goof, they're like 27 over, or I think you can go on, where is it? Ecomodder's top 10 vehicles. Some of these people are nuts. Like this little Mitsubishi Mirage, you have gasoline, top hybrids. So some fun stuff. But have a great evening, everyone. I'll post it somewhere so everyone else can watch. Thanks for joining. All right, I'm going to stop it. Bye.